Gurda State Forest, nestled in Lower Saxony, Germany, is a sprawling expanse of approximately 75 square kilometres. It is renowned for its rich biodiversity and significant ecological value, featuring dense thickets of ancient oaks and beeches. The forest is now a popular destination for outdoor activities such as hiking and wildlife observation, but was once a royal hunting ground. Now the forest stands as a silent witness to chilling events, most notably the Gurda murders of the late 1980s, which cast a haunting pall over its natural splendour. On May the 21st, 1989, during a summer heatwave, Ursula Reinhold, aged 45, and Peter Reinhold, aged 51, from Bergedorf, travelled to the Gurda forest for a leisurely walk, to sunbathe and have a picnic together. It is believed that they visited a clearing in hunting sector 147 of the forest to take advantage of the sunshine. Rather oddly, however, the Reinholds failed to return home, and after failing to contact loved ones and work colleagues, the couple were reported missing. 7 weeks later, on July the 12th, 1989, after searches turned up no sign of the pair, the bodies of Ursula and Peter were discovered in a nearby depression in the terrain by 3 blueberry pickers, having been murdered by an unknown perpetrator. Due to the continuous high temperatures during the weeks they had been missing, the bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition, partially mummified and skeletonized. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to this advanced decomposition, but it was evident that neither was a suicide nor an accident. Peter had sustained an injury to his larynx, though it was unclear if this was inflicted by the perpetrator or by local wildlife, examples being wild boar that often roamed the forest. According to police, it's possible that the couple died from strangulation or even gunshot wounds. When discovered, the Reinholds were unclothed, which many attributed to the scorching weather conditions. However, German police couldn't determine with certainty whether the couple's lack of clothing was of their own choosing or whether they had been stripped following their deaths. The murderer also stole the Reinholds' picnic basket and car keys, using the keys to obtain and drive their vehicle, which was later found abandoned 300 metres from the train station in Vincen an der Luhe, a small town in the Hamburg region. On their way to inform the forester, the berry pickers encountered a well-built, brown-haired individual who appeared to be around 40 years old and was carrying a bag. German authorities suspected that this man was possibly the perpetrator, possibly in search of more victims. On July the 12th, 1989, which just so happened to be the same day that the bodies of Ursula and Peter Reinhold were discovered, Ingrid Vambia, aged 46 from Uelzen, and Bernd Michael Kupping, aged 43, who was a district manager of the Toto Lotto Society from Hanover, drove to Gurda State Forest for a stroll. The pair were engaging in an extramarital affair, to which their spouses were reportedly unaware. That day, Ingrid and Bernd travelled to the forest after having some lunch together in nearby Bad Bevensen. The duo parked on a small side street near Forsthaus Rutten and walked over 2 kilometres into the forest. In hunting sector 138, at some point during that hot summer's day, Ingrid and Bernd encountered the perpetrator. 2 weeks later, on July 27th, police officers from the task force involved in the nationwide investigation into the Reinholds murder accidentally stumbled upon the bodies of Kupping and Vambia, who had been missing since July the 12th. Kupping and Vambia's bodies were found a mere 800 metres from where the Reinholds had been killed. Investigators reconstructed the events and concluded that the perpetrator committed the second double murder whilst the police were present at the first crime scene. Subsequent testing revealed that, rather interestingly, despite the close proximity of the two locations, gunshots could not be heard between them due to the rough terrain, meaning that the second attacks were carried out in an eerie silence, to the police at least. It is believed that the assailant threatened Ingrid and Bernd with a firearm, forcing them to lie down so he could bind their hands and feet with leukoplast tape. Köpping was strangled and then shot in the head with a 5.6mm small caliber weapon. Vambe suffered severe chest injuries, a smashed skull, and was also shot in the head. Her blouse was lifted to her bra, which had also been cut. The murderer then stole Köpping's Polaroid camera and his car keys, using the keys to flee in Köpping's Toyota vehicle. Investigators later revealed that the assailant drove the vehicle for approximately 7 days before abandoning it near a spa clinic in Bad Bevensen. Police quickly established connections between both crimes. A middle-aged couple was murdered and in the same forest. The offender stole tech items from both scenes, although the crimes did not resemble the typical hallmarks of a robbery, leading investigators to believe that the assailant most likely disposed of the items he stole due to the high interest in the cases across Germany at the time. Additionally, the assailant stole the victims' vehicles and abandoned them in small towns, with train links on the Lehrte-Hanover-Hamburg railway line. Due to these similarities, investigators were of the firm belief that they were dealing with the same perpetrator for both crimes. The two homicides had significant repercussions for the Gouda region, instilling fear throughout. The state forest was later dubbed as Totenwald, the Forest of the Dead, by the press, and as a result, Germans avoided the area, fearful that they would be the phantom killer's next victims. Neighbours suspected one another, given the likelihood that only someone who knew the forest and locality well had committed the murders, and not an outsider. Following the discovery of the first crime scene, the Lower Saxony police established a 40-member special task force, including detectives from the region and neighbouring city of Lüneburg. The task force generated almost 2,000 records, and officers interviewed approximately 10,000 people in regards to the double homicides. A facial composite sketch of the assailant was created and released to the public, accompanied by a reward of 50,000 Deutschmarks. Despite broadcasting the case on the television programme Aktenzeichen XY Ungelöst in December of 1989 and again in January of 1990, no significant leads were established. Further investigations by police profilers characterised the perpetrator as brutal, aggressive, emotionally cold, a loner, sexually disturbed, mentally ill, choleric, overly meticulous, and introverted. The investigators also speculated that the killer was likely a non-smoker, capable of managing his own schedule, and unlikely to have missed any work. Examinations of various individuals, including patients from closed psychiatric facilities who were on parole at the time of the murders, and guests from inns, hotels and spas in nearby Bad Bevensen, did not yield any new leads either. Additionally, reviewing records of all vehicle owners based on license plates captured in the area provided no significant clues. One suspect in regards to this case was Ingrid Vambe's own husband, the female victim in the second double murder. It was theorised that he may have hired someone to murder his unfaithful wife and her lover, but the hitman, inadvertently, targeted the wrong couple at first. Unfortunately, this theory seemed to hit a dead end rather early on in the investigation. Shortly after the investigation began, a potential lead emerged, but across the North Sea in the UK. In Wales, a similar double homicide to the Garda murders had occurred in June of 1989. A 64-year-old man named John Cooper was arrested in May 2009, found guilty for the murders of Peter and Gwenda Dixon, and sentenced to life imprisonment for the crime. The Dixons had been camping at Little Haven when they were shot at close range. Their bodies were found away from the road, with the husband's hands tied behind his back. A day before these double murders, witnesses reported seeing a man, around 40 years old, who resembled the description of the Garda murderer. They also mentioned a companion, about 20 years of age, who had either a German or Dutch accent. In the Garda forest, police had discovered a Dutch coin near to the Reynolds remains. Additionally, it should be noted that both of the crime scenes in Germany and Wales were near UK military training grounds. Despite these rather startling similarities, no definitive connection was made between the Garda murders and John Cooper. Another potential lead emerged in 1993 when a witness overheard a man threatening his wife during an argument, warning her not to forget the Garda murders and implying she might suffer the same fate if she continued to be unfaithful in their relationship. An initial review of the suspect seemed promising. He had a firearms permit for a 5.6mm small caliber gun, the same type used in the second double murder. Additionally, his appearance matched the facial composite sketch, and he had local knowledge as a forester from the area. After several months of investigations, the police obtained a search warrant and searched the forester's house, seizing his several weapons. Despite many hours of interrogation of both the suspect and his wife, no incriminating evidence was found, and the suspect had an alibi for the second murder. Consequently, the investigation did not lead to any charges being laid, and the man in question took his own life in 2005. The Special Commission investigating the Garda murders was eventually dissolved without identifying the killer. The head of the commission retired in 1997, leaving only 2 detectives from the former team working on the case. However, only one detective was still working on any leads in the cold case by the summer of 2009. It came to light in July of 2009 that 2 foreign hairs were found in the Reynolds vehicle, and they underwent testing using new and improved forensic technology, but unfortunately nothing of significance came from these efforts. German authorities still remained hopeful, however, that with advancements in DNA technology improving every year, that in the near future a link could be made to the phantom of Garda Forest. And in June of 2017, another breakthrough. Forensic analysis linked trace DNA from the Garda crime scene to the murder of entrepreneur Andrea Kay, which occurred in Hanover in May of 2015, but unfortunately no definitive connections were confirmed. This was primarily due to the conviction of her 27-year-old lover, Florian Kay, who was convicted of robbing and murdering her. The DNA found did not belong to Florian. The trace DNA found was on a wine bottle in Andrea's apartment, meaning she may have met the Garda murderer prior to her own death. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match any of the suspects. Evidence for identifying the perpetrator of the Garda murders emerged from the case of Birgit Meyer, a 41-year-old photographer from Lüneburg who disappeared without a trace in 1989, shortly after separating from her husband, Harold. On May the 15th, she had an appointment with her lawyer regarding the sale of her home in Breitlingen. The day before, she had been in good spirits, speaking to her mother, her brother, and her daughter on the phone about her upcoming move. The alarm was raised shortly afterwards when Jasmine, her daughter, awoke from her slumber at around midnight, screaming and with a foreboding feeling. She called her mother's phone number, but there was no answer, and this in itself was deeply concerning. Jasmine travelled to Hamburg early the next morning, but her mother did not answer the door. Police arrived at Myers' residence and investigated, but other than a footprint in the mud that led towards the house, nothing was found to indicate what happened to Birgit. Her car was left in the garage, though her ID was missing. Rather oddly, it was found 2 weeks later in a mailbox in Hamburg by a postal worker. Initially, suicide and murder by her husband were suspected, as it was known that Birgit was struggling to cope after discovering her husband had been unfaithful. She had turned to alcohol to cope with her heartbreak. Despite their initial suspicions of Myers' husband, later investigations shifted focus to Kurt Werner Wichmann, a 43-year-old cemetery gardener who had allegedly met Meyer at a party. During the course of the Gerda investigation, Kurt Werner Wichmann, who lived at the edge of a forest in Lüneburg, was investigated by German authorities. He was allegedly on sick leave during the time of the second murder, and was also not working on the Sunday of the Reynolds murders. Although a witness reported seeing him, the description did not match the facial composite, because Wichmann wore glasses, whereas the perpetrator allegedly did not. It should be noted that Wichmann was later named as a suspect in this case, and had an extensive record of previous criminal convictions. Kurt had grown up in care, but was still in contact with his parents when he threatened their tenant with a knife, which ended with Kurt in a young offenders institution. At 16 years old, he attacked and sexually assaulted a cyclist, and a year later threatened police officers with a small firearm. He was subsequently given 1 year in juvenile detention. Upon his release, a young man shot a female cyclist in a forest near Lüneburg, killing her immediately. Kurt was never officially charged due to lack of evidence, but he strongly resembled the description of the perpetrator given by witnesses. He also possessed a small caliber firearm, and even had newspaper clippings of the incident. In 1970, however, the now 21-year-old Wichmann was sentenced to 5.5 years in a juvenile correction centre for strangling and sexually assaulting a hitchhiker. Despite the magnitude and violence of the attack, the victim survived. He was only ever arrested and apprehended after his ego took over. He went to authorities himself to correct errors about the crime that had been written in the media. Many described Kurt as well-groomed and even down-to-earth, but also arrogant, quiet, and an egotistical loner with, quote, cold, icy eyes. He was a very odd individual by all accounts, who sometimes raised war flags outside of his property, making very unusual changes inside the home too, including secret caches and even a door that led to nowhere. The media, after learning of his crimes, dubbed him the Blonde Beast. Despite early suspicions and interrogation in 1989, Wichmann's alleged alibi for Myers' presumed murder was not thoroughly investigated. He had concealed that he was on sick leave at the time of her disappearance, which the police failed to follow up on. New investigations began following the appointment of a new prosecutor in Lüneburg. In 1993, Wichmann was charged with Myers' murder, and a raid on his house uncovered 2 small-caliber weapons, a converted gas pistol, stun guns, a silencer, handcuffs, sedatives, and what was only described in the media as torture tools. Disturbingly, investigators also found a soundproof torture room. Additionally, a bright red Ford Sports coupe with blood on the back seat was found buried in the backyard. Wichmann fled during the search, but was later arrested in Hesse after being involved in a road traffic accident. A number of weapons were found inside his vehicle, along with his younger brother. 10 days after his arrest whilst in custody, on April the 25th, 1993, Wichmann hanged himself with his trouser belt, leaving behind a plethora of unanswered questions. He also left a number of rather odd farewell letters in which he asked for his brother, who was 10 years his junior at the time and was his most loyal confidant, to, quote, clean the gutter. It should be noted that in regards to the secret room which Wichmann used for torture, only he and his younger brother had access to it. Since Wichmann's death, no further murders matching the same modus operandi have been carried out, leaving investigators believing that they had caught the Gerda killer. Unfortunately, Wichmann's vehicle and all of the items collected from his property have been disposed of. It seemed that the case had reached a dead end. However, Birgit Meyer's brother, Wolfgang Zielaff, a retired former chief of the state criminal police in Hamburg, didn't want to give up looking for answers for his family and the 4 victims found in Gerda State Forest. After retiring in 2002, Wolfgang led his own private investigation, forming a team with a forensic expert and defense lawyer, to name a few. In 2013, Zielaff found Aktenzeichen XY ungelöst videocassette tapes and newspaper clippings about the Gerda murders in a room belonging to Kurt Werner Wichmann. This discovery led to the creation of a new special commission by the Lüneburg police in 2015. In 2016, handcuffs linked to the case were found at the Hanover Medical School, containing blood traces that matched the DNA of Birgit Meyer. Zielaff also excavated Wichmann's former garage in Bardevik in September of 2017, where bone fragments were found in the concrete foundations. Forensic analysis later confirmed that, sadly, these bones belonged to missing mother, Birgit Meyer. Previously, multiple searches of Wichmann's house in 1993 had yielded no results whatsoever. Investigators believe Wichmann had intended to kidnap Meyer for ransom, but failed. In December of 2017, 28 years after the Gerda murders, the Lower Saxony police announced a new investigation, identifying Kurt Werner Wichmann as the prime suspect. A trace of his DNA was found in one of the stolen victims' vehicles, separate from the previously examined hair samples. Police also suspected an accomplice, noting that Wichmann drove to the Gerda area in his own vehicle, but left in the victims, leaving the retrieval of his car somewhat unexplained. Zielaff's findings suggested either 21 or 24, sources differ, unsolved murder cases in Lüneburg and nearby areas could be linked to Wichmann based on his profile and the locations. Police were also of the firm belief that Wichmann offended in other regions of Germany as well. After being released from prison in 1975, Wichmann lived in Karlsruhe for approximately 3 years with an elderly woman he had met through a personal ad during his time behind bars. During this particular period, several hitchhiker murders in Karlsruhe remained unsolved. Wichmann was known to be highly mobile, owning 5 vehicles at the time. On the 19th of January 2018, the Hanover Medical School announced their findings on Birgit Meyer. She had been shot based on their post-mortem findings. The Lüneburg police president suggested a serial killer, possibly operating nationally or internationally, might be responsible. He initiated a review of cold cases, specifically homicides and missing persons cases. In February of 2018, the case was featured once again on Achtenzeichen X Y Ungelöst. Later in 2018, police and several detectives searched Wichmann's former property for more than 2 weeks, utilising sniffer dogs and metal detectors. They managed to secure over 400 items of interest, including a Polaroid camera and a pair of binoculars, which were then examined by the State Office of Criminal Investigation of Lower Saxony for links to other murders. Blue Honda Civic parts with a distinctive duck sticker on the rear window were found buried on the property, as were a number of firearms, bladed weapons, tools, jewellery, handbags, clothes, and women's shoes, to name a few. The owners of these items have never been found. It is believed by some that all of these items were taken as trophies from his victims. Cadaver dogs searched the property for any signs of human remains, but unfortunately to no avail. In the autumn of 2018, a heavily dusted suitcase was discovered in an attic in an industrial area of Lüneburg. The suitcase contained 2 firearms with ammunition and a driver's license issued to Kurt Werner Wichmann in Karlsruhe in 1976. Michael Volkert, a Lüneburg used car dealer, found the suitcase and took it to a regional newspaper, who then in turn handed it over to the police. Unfortunately, despite identifying the most likely perpetrator in this case, the Gurda State Forest murders is officially a closed case. This is due to the fact that, in German law, criminal cases are closed when the prime suspect dies. Therefore, the investigation has been discontinued. The Gurda murders, long shrouded in mystery, saw renewed investigation efforts leading to significant breakthroughs. Through the dedicated efforts of Wolfgang Zielaf and modern forensic methods, crucial evidence was uncovered, pointing to Kurt Werner Wichmann as the prime suspect. Discoveries of Wichmann's personal items and DNA evidence solidified his connection to the crimes. Despite his death, ongoing investigations continue to explore his possible involvement in numerous other unsolved cases, shedding light on a serial killer's dark legacy.